Well, what would you see as a concrete evidence of positive change from your perspective if you saw something on TV or a headline or even things as you walk around your community? What would you see that would be evidence of positive change
That's
to
a
your
good
mind?
question. Obama did something, I should say he hasn't done it yet. It's being proposed in this present budget that's coming up that's going to be voted on in the next couple of weeks, where they're no longer going to fund charter schools in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., their schools are primarily black, public schools. And he's going to deny these kids an opportunity for education, a good education, to help out one of the coalition members that got him elected, which is the NEA, the teachers union, irrespective of the fact that it's hurting all these kids that he supposedly worked so hard on the south side of Chicago. If he wants, what I would consider signs of positive change is for him to stand up to the NEA and these other organizations and say, look, and I've said this before in my radio program, we need leadership, particularly black leadership, that will say to the coalition members of the Democratic Party, the ACLU, the NAACP, and the NEA, and say, look, our kids are suffering. It is insane for African American, particularly African American leadership, to watch a 50% year after year, 50% dropout rate and do nothing about it. Every year since 1960, our graduation rates in the black community, for Americans in general, but in particular African Americans, has gone down every decade. Actually every year, but every decade is the demarcation point where it's being measured. And they think the status quo is acceptable. And this is why I said, you know what? To the African American leadership, in particular in this case, if this was Liberia, if this was Rhodesia, one of those African countries there on the continent of Africa, those Negroes would be dodging gunfire from the people like myself. They're lucky. They need to get down on the ground and kiss the ground and thank God they live in America. Because I am just outraged at what they're doing to our kids. As I said before, I spent 15 years in the Nation of Islam. I'm steeped in do for self. As I said before, I've dined at the banquet table of hate. And what we have now is black leadership that have come up to the banquet table of opportunity, and rather than getting the plate and moving on, they have pulled up a chair and denying all the people behind them an opportunity to live the good life. When I heard Eric Holder, for instance, make the comment the other day about America's a nation of cowards, that was a slap in the face to all the whites and all the blacks who supported Obama. What, and this is the question I asked Eric Holder, I asked Michelle Obama, I asked Barack Obama, what is it you want, bro? What is it you want? America's giving you the best that it has to offer, and you're still not grateful. I submit to you, you write this in blood, African Americans in particular will never prosper in this country as long as we hold this scornful, as long as we have a scornful heart and this bitterness that we harbor. There were a lot of white folks who came down here in the 60s and stood shoulder to shoulders with us. And the worst thing you could be called in the South was a nigger lover. And they took the slings and arrows. Viola Louisa, who died over in Alabama, Michigan housewife who came down there, put it all on the line. And we make no distinction for that which is done. And what's interesting, those who came down and stood shoulder to shoulder, the white that did, they sit in silence. They don't ask for credit. They don't say, hey, you know, we did this with you. But they got to be sitting back saying, well, what was it all for? And one of the things that's clear to me, right here, I don't know if you just got into town, our mayor just got a mistrial in a case where he went, you read that? Where he went into a young man's house and just tore it down with sledgehammers. He was on a drunken binge along with a recreational vehicle full of young boys. And in other words, what I'm saying is that we just replaced Jim Crow with Black Crow. We got black politicians doing the same thing that we railed against, and that goes to my point why I won't support what Obama is doing in terms of the policies I've heard him state to date, and that is there is no difference in the heart of men. Tyranny runs in the heart of men, and we're seeing that with black leadership today. We're more than willing to go in and tear down a man's house, just like the Night Riders and the White Citizens Council did 40, 50 years ago, and we justify it because, well, they were dealing drugs there. Well, you know what? It goes back to what my complaint is with the NAACP, the NEA, and ACLU as it relates to charter schools and allowing our kids to get a good education. if you allow these kids to get a good education, the option of selling drugs may not be the only option they have. The ACLU, the NAACP, and the NEA, they will sue on behalf of the prisoners up in Parchment, our state prison here, and give them living conditions, an extra 3 or 4 square feet of exercise room. But they may not even be in prison if they were allowed to get a good education in the 1st through 3rd grade. This is racism on a scale being perpetrated by blacks. And I'll say this here, the state chapter of the NAACP here needs to have its charter pool. There's just so much. You got one man, the head of the NAACP in this state is against charter school, but yet he sends his kids to private schools. He's the only one on the payroll for the state NAACP. His money comes from the NEA, all these other nonprofits. So they're paying him to hold everybody else back, and then he goes back and files a lawsuit against the state of Mississippi, which all the taxpayers have to pay to enhance the privileges of some prisoner in jail who need not even be there, but for that NAACP head. This is criminal, and I submit to you that American, and just as Elijah Muhammad said when I was in the Nation of Islam, he said blacks are going to be destroyed in this country. I had no idea that it would be at the hands of other blacks.